This episode of Ham Talk Live is brought to you by Tower Electronics. For connectors, cables, and more, call 920-435-2973 or visit pl-259.com. And by ICOM. Heard it, worked it, logged it. Visit www.icomamerica.com/amateur for more information about ICOM radios.
It's Ham Radio.
Hey, good evening, everyone. It's time for Ham Talk Live. It's episode number 242, Rebuilding the Ham Shack, recorded live on Thursday, January 14th, 2021. I'm your host, Neil Rapp, WB9VPG. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Ham Talk Live. Tonight, we're joined by K0NEB, Joe Eisneberg, and we'll take your calls live in just a few minutes. Last week on the show, Michael Colley, W4MCA, was here to talk about Hamcation SE, Hamcation Special Edition. If you missed the show, you can listen anytime at hamtalklive.com or on your favorite podcast app or YouTube, or you can catch the rebroadcast on WTWW. That's 5085 AM. Saturday afternoons at about 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time each week. And we do have a few announcements here to start off tonight, as we do from time to time. First of all, Hamvention, if you hadn't heard, sadly, Hamvention 2021 also had to be canceled. And so next week, Michael Coulter, WHCI, the spokesperson from the Dayton Hamvention, will be here to talk about it and the plans for what was planned to be Hamvention weekend. They're planning another QSO party, so be sure to tune in next week. We'll hear more about what happened with Hamvention and what their plans are. Also, the AM Rally is coming up. The annual AM Rally is the first weekend of February, and encourages everybody to get on any kind of equipment, vintage or even a new SDR, and get on AM. Standard AM, open to everybody on 160, 80, 40, 20, 15, 10, and 6. And at 0 Zulu Saturday, February 6th through 700 Zulu Monday, February 8th, and in the Eastern Time Zone, that's 7 p.m. on Friday, February 5th, through 2 a.m. on Monday, February 8th, for the AM Rally. And then the Virtual Ham Expo is coming up. The QSO Today Virtual Ham Expo will return on March 13th and 14th. The QSO Today team has been working hard to make this upcoming expo even better with new speakers, panel discussions, kit building workshops, and much more. Early bird tickets are $10 and include entry for the live 2-day period as well as the 30-day on-demand period. You can register at QSOTodayHamExpo.com. There's over 60 speakers, including Bob Alphin, K4UEE, talking about his favorite DXpeditions to the top 10 most wanted DXCC entities. And they're going to have a live virtual kit building workshop. You can get the kit. You can buy that in advance and delivered to you in time so you can build from home. So make sure you check that out. Okay, well, get your questions ready to go. If you're listening to us live on Thursday night, you can give us a call after the interview by calling 859-982-7373. You can also tweet us. It's at Ham Talk Live. You can tweet us there, and also the comments. If you're listening to us on Spreaker, you can type into the comments. There's kind of like a chat area, so you can use that as well. But again, the phone number, and we'll give that out a few more times before it's time to call. The phone number will be 859-982-7373. And I'll be back with Joe right after this word from Tower Electronics right here on Ham Talk Live.
Hey, honey, have you seen the PL259s anywhere?
No, I haven't. Come on, kids. Let's go. There's just one place to go for all of your connector needs.
Tower Electronics.
Tower Electronics.
Tower Electronics.
A giant warehouse of connectors and adapters for every occasion. Thousands to choose from in every shape, size, and color. And they have antennas, soldering supplies, cables, meters, and more. Where do you go if you want to buy a connector at a fraction of retail cost?
Tower Electronics.
Tower Electronics.
Tower Electronics. And this weekend only, take advantage of our special liquidation sale. Buy 9 solder-type PL259s, get the 10th one for just 1 penny. They make great Christmas presents. And what better way to say I love you than with the gift of a PL259?
Tower Electronics.
Tower Electronics.
Tower Electronics.
I'm Scott, KB9AMM of Tower Electronics. I like the PL259 connector so much, I bought the company.
Tower Electronics, coming to a Hamfest near you, or online at pl-259.com. And we're in the yellow pages under Amateur Radio Connectors.
My, wherever did you get that lovely PL259?
Tower Electronics, pl-259.com, or call 920-435-2973.
Do we sell PL259 connectors?
Two antennas met on a roof, fell in love, and got married. The ceremony wasn't much, but the reception was excellent. You're listening to Ham Talk Live with Neil Rapp.
Welcome back to Ham Talk Live. Thanks to Scott and Jill at Tower Electronics for sponsoring the show tonight to help bring you Ham Talk Live. They'll be at Jack Moyer's Tailgate in Orlando this weekend, January 16th. And then they have Dalton, Georgia coming up on February 27th. And you can visit them online at pl-259.com. So you can check them out anytime, anywhere. Well, welcome back to Ham Talk Live. Tonight, Joe Eisneberg, K0NEB, joins us on the Orlando Amateur Radio Club and Hamcation line. Joe is from Lincoln, Nebraska, and well known for his kit building expertise and his picture shows of Hamvention. He's the longtime kit building editor at CQ Magazine and often makes presentations and kit builds at Hamfest, conventions, club meetings. He, like me, started at an early age in ham radio and has been licensed since 1969. And at Dayton, he's the guy wearing the Dr. Seuss hat. And for the first time tonight, Joe, we're not talking about kits. Although we could talk about kits a little bit because you've got some kit building stuff going on. But our main focus tonight isn't about kits for a change.
Well, actually, I used kits. In fact, the way I covered this in the magazine is the fact that antennas are kits. Things that you assemble, like rotator control cable connectors and so forth, are all kits. And so I kind of took that aspect of it, but kind of walked through the process of what it took to make my signal a little bit louder from here in Nebraska.
Well, and I had the chance to catch you on the 12 Days of Christmas and the Yoda Month activities toward the middle of December, and you were booming into the shack here in Indiana. And it was a noticeable difference. So we're going to talk a little bit about how you have taken your shack and just kind of revamped everything. And you know, we were talking about the picture on the cover of this month's CQ magazine, and that being your tower project. And, we were talking about, and you mentioned that, normally you see these great big antenna farms, and all these, de-expeditions out in the middle of nowhere and all this. And it's like, gee, that was just my tower on the cover. So talk a little bit about that.
That's quite a difference for the magazine. And I was very honored that my editor decided that it was significant enough of a project that it deserved to be on the cover. And yeah, it's not normal because usually you have the de-expeditions and so forth. But I'm glad it's going to help inspire people, because we got a lot of people that are stuck home right now, and with Dayton even being canceled, it looks like the regular Hamfest circuit isn't going to come alive for any large ones until sometime this summer. So it gives you some time to work on your station at home. And so that's what I did. The problem is a lot of other people are doing this at this time. And so the problem is that antennas and cable and rotators and other things that you'd use, and some radios and so forth, are hard to come by. And so if you ever listen to any of the DX Engineering podcasts, he's always complaining that they're having trouble with suppliers right now. And it's because it depends on where in the world or where in this country it comes from. The coronavirus has affected supplies of everything. So we'll start off with the first problem that I wanted to tackle. Power distribution was not an issue. Although one of the power supplies I did replace, one of the Astron 35Ms with the Samlex. But that wasn't the major issue. Power distribution was not an issue, but it was a lot of unused cables. Now, a lot of people think, okay, I've got all these wires from years ago, and I'll just punch another hole in the wall and I'll run another cable through. Well, that's what I did for 35 years. And so you end up with a lot of cables that are passing through the wall and then goes into the laundry room next door to the shack, which is where my workbench is, and then out through a hole in the wall to the tower in the outside world. Well, I had 4 conductor cables and 8 conductor cables and another old rotor cable and several coaxes that were cut on both ends. They were replaced by newer cables, but they were still like RG8X and so forth. And so the problem was that what I didn't realize is that I had an untenable situation where I couldn't get on 80 or 160 on FT8 because there was so much RF coming back into the shack that the computer would reboot or the radio would even reboot.
Mm-hmm. And I know that feeling. Using
chokes on the line cut it down, but it was still an issue. And so it brought back the situation where I've seen this at field day and stuff as well, and it's unused cables just sitting there. Actually, the RF that comes down the jacket of adjacent lines ends up on these unused cables and re-radiates. And so digging out all the old wires was the first step. The second step was when I did that, I got rid of some coaxes that were maybe 30 years old or so, and I decided to go with a remote coax switch. And at the same time, I wanted to improve the grounds because I discovered I had one 14-gauge wire that was running into the laundry room, and it was hooked to the copper pipe. And then there was a thinner wire than that went outside and connected to one of the ground rods. Well, that was all pretty much rotted out. And so I went to the hardware store and got some 8-gauge and 4-gauge copper. And the ground rod system around the tower was in good shape. So I connected that to the water pipe just inside the house. As it comes in, it goes right by the water pipe. and then connected that to a new heavy cable that came into the shack. Now, what I did was I bought a DX Engineering grounding block kind of a thing, and it's a kit, and it comes with a copper bracket that you screw into the wall, and it has space for 3 alpha delta transit traps. And so I bought those, and I put those on there, and then I got some braided wire, and now people tell me I shouldn't have used the braided wire, but it seems to work okay. And so I have separate grounds that go to each radio instead of a wire that kind of went from one wing nut to another on all the different radios. Now they all go to this one ground, and they go out. And when I changed the ground, and then I put a brand new clamp on the pipe, when I pulled the other wire off the old clamp, it pretty much came right out in my hand. So I sanded the pipe and then put the clamp on and everything, and the 2 heavy gauge wires, the one going outdoors and the one going into the shack. And immediately the noise floor was incredibly dropped. It went from about an S7 to about an S2. And I thought, oh, well, that's interesting. So then I connected the remote coax switch, and I cut all the coaxes that came into the house, the old ones. And then I had a new piece of LMR 400 that went from the coax switch to the radios. And so once again, the signals improved just immensely, but the old cables were still hooked up to the old antennas outside. But yet the noise floor had dropped just tremendously, and all the RF problems had gone away. And I thought, oh, yes, this works, getting rid of all the old cables. In fact, we recycled the cables, and I ended up getting $16.50 for them. Just piled them up and took them to a recycle center. But by going to the remote coax switch, instead of having like 5 or 6 runs of LMR 400 coming into the house, I have 1. And that made a big difference. Now, there's some quirks that I discovered with that, but we'll get into that later. But it works. It works quite well. The coax switch, because it is remote, it has to be powered on for the antenna to be live at the radio. So that's kind of a good thing, because if I turn it off, it opens that connection. But I also have the lightning arresters inside, and they're also grounded when they hit the coax switch, because the frame of that is grounded directly to the tower. So the noise level was immediately lower. The signal strengths were better, but the antennas, they were old. So I ordered a 5-element 6-meter beam, and then a new TH3 MK4 to replace the TH3 Junior. And I, of course, ordered LMR 400 for the 6-meter beam and for the UHF antenna that's above that, and for some other antennas. And then the wire antennas were another problem. And that was, I had 1 rope on a pulley and 3 hooks, 3 snap hooks. And so I had 3 wire antennas on 1 rope, which wasn't very good, because the wind would bang them against the tower, and sometimes they'd short out and things like that. And when I tried to lower them to repair it, they would get caught. So, because they were pulling in 3 different directions. And so that rope is still there, and it holds the 40-meter double bazooka, but it does not hold, any other wires. That rope is still there, but I replaced that rope. And then I put up 4 more separate pulleys with Dacron rope. And so that way I have antennas that have survived 2 ice storms already. And we had 55-mile-an-hour winds today, and also a few days after we put this up in November. And so I have wires now for bands that I didn't have before. I have a 17-meter double bazooka. I have a 12-meter dipole. I have 160 meter shortened half sloper that's top fed, and I have an 80 meter version of the same thing. So in addition to the 40 meter double bazooka and the 12 meter dipole that I hung, all of them are fed with LMR 400, except for I think one of them is on LMR 240, which is kind of like a higher end version of RG8X that lets you still run up to a kilowatt. So the end result of the whole project was I had a lot of stuff to do in a very short amount of time, because by the time all this stuff came in, it was the end of October, and I had to get my tower crew, who had been working to get the repeaters in the area all set up for winter. And so what happened is we ended up doing it on 2 consecutive afternoons, 2 hours each. And the first one, we stripped the tower completely down. All the cables came off. And then I ran new rotor cable and everything. And we actually got the rotor back up, and we got the TH3 and the 6 meter beam and the UHF all reconnected with new cable all the way through. And I have to tell you that there was a piece of RG8X that I used to as an interim repair, because we had trouble with an owl that would be, and a hawk that would claw onto the UHF antenna. And so that was a temporary fix that lasted 15 years, but there were claw holes all over the piece of 8X. Now we've rerouted it so that it's underneath, so that if he puts his claws on it, he will be on the boom and not on the cable. So some changes, because the tower is the highest point in the neighborhood, and it is attractive to this type of bird.
Yeah.
So I have mourning doves, I have an owl, and I have a hawk, and I have pictures of them that do roost up there from time to time. And part of the problem is there's a city park behind me, so there's field mice and things like that they go after.
Yeah.
But
this really hits home, because when I was talking to you the other day on HF, I was going through that exact thing. Every time I'd key up, the monitor on the computer would go out. And so it was like, okay, I got to stay off of 80. And on 40, I got to be in the lower part of the band, not the higher part of the band, because my monitor would go out. And one time it even took out the router, and I had to re-upload the firmware and reboot the router just to get back on. And I'm trying to run this 12 Days of Christmas thing, and it's like, it wasn't good. So was that the motivating factor? Is that what finally made you say, hey, it's time to do this?
Yeah. When things just quit working, it got to the point where anything but maybe 20 meters sideband and 40 meters wouldn't work. I decided that I'm stuck home. This is the time to do it and get everything done. Was there RFI issues when I was done? Yes, there was. And the addition of being able to use the SB200 amplifier, which I have never had an amplifier at home in the 52 years I've been a ham, that brought its own little interesting things. And I have to tell you, you can get these through DX Engineering. Snap-on chokes are wonderful, and it really takes things out. I had a problem that the TV would turn itself on upstairs, just randomly turned itself on. And so I took the power cord to that, and to the cable box actually goes into my fiber and my Blu-ray player. And it turned out to be the Blu-ray player was the thing that was at fault, because I would key up and it would say insert disc on the TV. And I thought, oh, okay. Even though the TV was off, because I have a smart TV, and when you turn that on, turn on a device that's plugged into it, it sees that on the HDMI port, and it turns the TV on.
Yeah.
So, but I wrapped the power cords of all those devices through individual snap-on chokes. And then I had the problem that the furnace kept trying to turn on every time I sent a data frame on FT8. Well, that turns out to be the thermostat wire, because part of the changes was the 40-meter antenna got raised about 15 feet higher, which worked wonderful for 40 meters, but it put it right at the level of the upstairs thermostat, which is a Nest thermostat, a very smart thermostat. And so it was putting RF back down the line and went into the controller in the furnace. So once again, loosening up the thermostat wire by removing a couple zip ties, wrap a couple turns around the snap-on choke, and that took that problem out right away, even when I'm running 500 or 600 watts. So I knew there would be issues. It was just a matter of what are they going to be when I do this. But I have not had a single complaint from the neighbors. Nobody has had any problem at all. One of them changed from a satellite dish to fiber, but I think that was more because of the internet, not because of any RFI. So, and I don't have a neighbor on the other side that's on cable or anything either. They're on fiber as well. So, that was a blessing. But, going to LMR 400 was a real bonus on this.
Yeah. Well, let's take our break here, Joe, and then we're going to come back. We're going to talk about this a little bit more and more about what you did on the inside of the shack, which we've already kind of gotten into, but we'll come back and talk more about that and some ideas here. And I tell you, I've been just kind of putting things off and waiting, until I move and set up the new shack and everything. And it's kind of the same story. It's like, okay, I know I could do this, and those snap-on chokes, I used to get them, just when I needed them. And finally I just had to forget it and bought a whole bag of them and been putting them on. But, it didn't help a whole lot in my situation. So we're going to have to do that. But let's take a break here, and then we'll come back. We'll talk more with Joe Eisneberg, K0NEB, about renovating a shack. Maybe get some ideas to renovate your shack right after this word from ICOM America right here on Ham Talk Live. Happy 2021 from ICOM. ICOM's IC705 gives hours of fun and enjoyment working your favorite bands this holiday season. The IC705 is the perfect sidekick for hams that like to enjoy what both the great indoors and outdoors have to offer. It's the perfect QRP companion, base station features and functionality at the tip of your fingers, in a portable package, covering HF, 6 meters, 2 meters, and 70 centimeters. This compact rig weighs in at just over 2 pounds, with RF direct sampling for most of the HF band and IF sampling for frequencies above 25 megahertz. It comes with a 4.3-inch color touchscreen with live band scope and waterfall. It runs 5 watts with the battery, 10 watts with a power supply. Sideband CW, AM, FM, as well as full D-Star functions are available. A micro USB connector, Bluetooth, wireless LAN, micro SD card slot, integrated GPS with antenna and GPS logger. The speaker mic comes standard and supports QRP and portable QRP operation. The perfect accessory for the IC705 is the now available optional backpack, LC192, with a special compartment for your IC705 and room for accessories for soda activations or a day in the park. Other accessories now available include a QRP portable magnetic antenna, standard battery pack, lithium-ion battery pack, micro USB cable, USB Type-C to micro USB cable, a DC power cable, a compact lapel push-to-talk Bluetooth, with earphone and a desktop tray. And the antenna tuner is coming soon. And there's free software to download, the programming software, the Android app, the terminal mode access point mode application, and the smartphone picture utility for Android, iOS, and Windows. Also available is the RSBA1 IP remote control software, which requires purchase. Visit ICOMAmerica.com/amateur for more information on ICOM radios.
Join the conversation. Give us a call at 859-982-7373. Again, the number to call is 859-982-7373. Or, if you'd rather type than talk, tweet us at Ham Talk Live. Now, here's Neil Rapp with more Ham Talk Live.
Here's the snap. Rapp takes the rig. He breaks through the pileup. He's on 80, now 40, now 20, 15, 10, 2 meters. Touchdown, Ham Talk Live.
Welcome back to Ham Talk Live. Thanks to ICOM America for sponsoring the show. Check them out at ICOMAmerica.com/amateur. And check out Ham Talk Live every Thursday night, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, right here at hamtalklive.com. And check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as well. And we'll get back to Joe K0NEB in just a few moments. But now, it's that time once again for the Ham Talk Live Ham Radio Joke of the Week.
Now it's time for the Ham Talk Live Ham Radio Joke of the Week, a part of the show where Rick tells us a ham radio joke. The Ham Talk Live Ham Radio Joke of the Week is brought to you by QRM Labs. Now, here's Rick Garrett in 9 GSU with today's Ham Talk Live Joke of the Week.
The other day, a buddy of mine told me he got Mexico on his ham radio. That's no big deal. I opened my window and got chili.
This has been the Ham Talk Live Ham Radio Joke of the Week with Rick Garrett in 9 GSU. Tune in again next week for another joke from Rick.
Oh, boy. He's at it again. He got chili. Oh, my goodness. All right. Well, thanks, Rick, for that. 859-982-7373 is the phone number. If you'd like to call in, go ahead and do that. 859-982-7373. You can tweet us at Ham Talk Live if you're listening to us on WTWW. Or on the podcast edition, you won't be able to reach us live since we're doing this on Thursday night, but Joe is back here, and we're going to talk a little bit more about his shack renovations and maybe get some ideas here. And Chris AA4CB typed in and says that you finally got to hook up all the antennas you want at Dayton and Huntsville. So
actually, I bought a few of them there. One of them I did win, and the others I bought, and they come from radio waves. Is almost all the wires are radio waves antennas. And something I didn't mention before is that when you're dealing with rotor cable, even though it's shielded and so forth, and the shielded wire that comes in that runs the remote coax switch, which is a 9 or 10 conductor cable, you need to use one of those snap-on chokes as well. And the reason is that there's a lot of antennas that use the coax as part of the counterpoise, especially my 160 and 80 meter antennas. Now, they both have a ground wire that attaches to the base of the tower, but you still have some RF that some of it gets bled off when it goes to the coax switch. And then I have another choke that handles the cable that comes from the coax switch to the radio. But there are other lines coming in, like the VHF, UHF lines that aren't bypassed that way. They do go to a ground later on. And the control cables do end up with RF on them, and so choking them where they come into the house, that pretty well takes care of that by wrapping around one of those snap-on chokes. You mentioned ICOM earlier. The main rig here, for those who don't know, is an ICOM 7610. And I also have a 7300 and a 9700, which is now doing the duties on VHF and UHF. And it's going to get a little bit of a workout this weekend with the January VHF contest. So we're going to try it out and see what it does. I don't have a lot of fancy VHF, UHF antennas up quite yet. 2 meters, unfortunately, is on a discone, but UHF is on 6 elements up 55 feet. So, and of course we have the 6 meter beam. So, we'll see what we can do during the VHF contest, but all those are once again fed with the LMR 400. The 400 that I use is called Ultraflex. And what's interesting is I don't think the loss at 6 meters is even a dB at 100 feet, or maybe 1 dB. And you compare that to the old RG8 that I had, that even the braid wasn't 100% from 30 years ago. And the difference in the loss is incredible. And when people say, well, I'm not going to invest in good cable, well, if you have 2 or 3 dB loss, that's like, if you replace that with the good stuff, that's like buying an amplifier. So if you're going to spend another $30 or so on that cable, that's like buying a 200 watt amplifier. So you have to think of it in terms of dB. Okay.
Yeah. I remember, Dad got a hold of a piece of 1/2-inch hardline and put it on our VHF antenna, and the difference that it made, even just at 50 feet, was just phenomenal. And so you really, especially VHF and UHF, you've got to really, consider what feed line you can afford and what feed line you want to use, because it will make a huge difference. And, you've already mentioned, lowering your noise floor on HF and getting all that stuff going. And, I know you've got more plans, to finish up, once we get out of this, frigid winter. But, let's talk a little bit about that, and then let's talk a little bit about, getting that amplifier hooked up and what else you did inside.
Well, the amplifier, I spent 3 months writing about in CQ magazine, because I did 3 different Harbach kits. And I went through assembling the kits, and then I went through the beginnings of installing them in the radio, in the amplifier. And then the final one was what they did and everything. The Harbach kits basically replaced the power supply. We added inrush protection, and then we have a relay control voltage change. So instead of having 120 volts DC across a relay of a modern radio, we have about 1.5 volts at about 10 milliamps, handling the relay keying. And the inrush protection, of course, protects the tubes and the capacitors and so on when you fire it up. But the biggest change was the power supply. And that is, when you replace a 52-year-old power supply, it's amazing the technical differences between filter capacitors and diodes and load resistors and stuff that make up this power supply board. And so I highly recommend the Harbach kits for restoring the amplifier. But there was one last-minute piece that I did not do during that process that I was reminded that I should do to preserve the tubes, because I got 2 brand new tubes as well in this amplifier, and that is the parasitic choke. It's a resistor with a coil wrapped around it, or sometimes parallel to it, depending on your amplifier. And so a friend of mine, Dan, WB0LJK in Iowa, is a Collins engineer, and he has a 30L1 at home, and it uses the same pair of 572 tubes, pretty much the same configuration as the SB200. And he told me which resistor to get, and he gave me some of the special wire that he used to do it, gave me the dimensions. I wrapped it around a drill bit to wind the coil and put the resistor in there, soldered that all together and replaced that. And so I have all new parasitic coils as well in the amplifier. And away it goes. The only band I'm having trouble with is 10. And that's because I think whoever had this amplifier before me must have tuned the slug to 11 or something. And so, and
not that anybody would ever have done that.
And so 10 doesn't work, and I'm not going to mess with the coil because if you try and turn those slugs, they can shatter because it's 52 years old. But otherwise, the amplifier works well, and it helps heat up the shack in the wintertime. The VHF UHF changes will be a 2-meter 440 horizontal array, and another 2-meter 440 antenna that'll just go to a mobile type radio in the shack that I will use for the local repeaters, freeing up the 9700 to be used for the more serious stuff, like 2-meter sideband and troposcatter and things like that. So that will be what finishes up the renovations here. But I have to tell people, it's worth it to do that, to do this. The grounding, just changing the grounding and putting in new cables and new grounding and new lightning and static discharge devices took my noise level down, like I said, from an average of S7 all the way down to S2 and lower, of course, depending on band conditions. Now I'm able to more discern if the noise is band conditions or neighborhood noise or whatever. And it makes a huge difference. Grounding, cables, it all makes a better shack. And I can't emphasize that enough, because after being a ham for 52 years and just kind of rolling with the punches as things got older, it is a great relief when everything works and I get DX on 12 meters on FT8 and things like that. And a guy in New Zealand, I could rag chew with him for 30 minutes on 15 meters when I didn't hear many other signals on the band. And things that I could have never dreamed I could do is now possible.
Yeah, it's just amazing what that can do. And I look forward to getting mine done when I get moved and get everything going. And I found that I've got a stoplight, a traffic light controller in the neighborhood now that I'm picking up, and it's raised my noise floor. So there's that.
Well, some of those, the stoplights are LEDs, and some of those can be noisy. There's all sorts of things that can cause a problem, but it takes time to do it right. Ward Silver, N0AX, who is my ARL handbook editor, has a great book called Grounding and Bonding for the radio amateur, and that is well worth it. Ward Silver's book is probably about the most authoritative book on the subject of grounding and bonding and so forth.
Yeah, that book is sitting on the shelf. I'm looking at it right now. It's here, and I actually had it sitting out, and the guy from the satellite company came to change out some equipment, and he mentioned that he got written up because it's of a lightning issue somewhere, and he saw that book by Ward and said, "Do you mind if I take a look at this book?" Because he was really interested in the grounding and bonding thing. And I'm like, yeah, sure, take a look at it. It's just fabulous. I've heard his presentation on it at a couple of different club meetings, and he's really got some good stuff. So if you haven't checked that out, check it out. if you haven't seen his presentation, look around for it. I'm sure you can find it. But he's got some great information.
Yeah, the other thing I wanted to mention is the tuner I'm using now is an MFJ 998, and it handles full legal limit. And it's kind of interesting in that you route the relay control for the amplifier through the tuner so that when you tune the antenna, it uses the rig as the exciter, and it tunes the antenna, but it holds the amplifier offline. And then when it's done tuning, the amp is now online. So you can tune your amp knowing that it's not going to be into a mismatch. The other thing is everybody says, but you're a QRP guy and you make all these little low-power kit radios. Well, when you reduce your loss in your feed line and you improve your antenna gain and your ground and stuff, it works good for QRP as well.
Oh, yeah. I would argue that it's probably more important because you don't have that much to start with, and if you can, cut down your losses, that's a major issue. So, 859-982. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, some of the connectors I got were from Tower Electronics, and the cable I got was from ABR in Texas, and I got it with pre-made connectors on it as well. And like I said, the grounding and the remote coax switch and so forth came from DX Engineering. The radios are ICOMs. And some of the cable, the control cable for the rotator came from the Wireman. So
there we go.
Lots of great suppliers out there. He also supplied some of the rope I used.
Yeah, and you mentioned the supply issues, and every vendor I've talked to is saying the same thing. It's really difficult to keep stock going because you just don't know when that stuff is coming in. 859-982-7373 is the phone number. If you'd like to call in, it's time to do that right now. So give us a call at 859-982-7373. Brett, WY7BG on Twitter says, good evening, Neil and Joe. You saw Joe 2 weeks before the Nebraska State Hamfest was canceled, where he thought he'd see you again. But he heard you and says that you're really loud there in Wyoming on FT8, and that new setup must be working. And he says might want to do a show on RF in the shack, and he's got some tips to offer. And I know, like I said, Ward in his grounding and bonding has some really good stuff too. So yeah, we may need Ward to do that here too.
Yeah, Ward would be a real good guest. The other thing is plan ahead by having everything done and all the feed lines done into the house. When we had the tower crew, all I had was the cables coming down before I plugged them into the coax switch at the base of the tower. So I could measure the SWR on any of the lines and then choose which portal to plug them into. But everything was all done. And that's the thing, to be really prepared for your tower crew, because they don't want to be putting PL259s on and things like that. They want to bring things down, strip the tower clean, bring the stuff back up, and things like I replaced the rotor and stuff. I have to thank MFJ for being real prompt at getting all this stuff to me, and the tuner and everything, and it works wonderful. I have a few oddities that I'm resolving. It has to do with feeding 6 meters through a tuner that's not made for 6 meters, so I have to bypass it when I am on 6. But otherwise, everything seemed to work great, and now it makes me think about maybe I need a bigger amplifier.
I have to admit, I did a little amplifier shopping online, window shopping, but did a little shopping last week trying to pick one out. So we'll see.
Well, surprisingly, I know a lot of guys use the AL811 and AL811H, and they are very popular because they use an inexpensive tube. And if you don't want as much power as your local AM broadcast station in your shack, then one of those amps, it'll get you through the pileup. The difference might be an S unit below the full legal limit, but when you're putting out 600 to 800 watts PEP, that's pretty good. They're going to hear you.
Yeah. Troy W9KVR says he's got a solar farm about a half mile away, and all kinds of inverter noise there, and says Ward's book should be required reading. It really is major. I mean, I went away from the club meeting. I had him Zoom in at our local club meeting before all the COVID stuff happened, and I walked away from that just saying, okay, I have got to plan this out on the new house. We got to get some ground rods in there. We got to get them bonded. We got to do a better job of that than what I have now, which is next to nothing.
Well, the good thing is you'll have access to a new place with no furniture or anything in there, and it's a great time to figure out how you're going to get your cables out, how you're going to bond the water pipe and power service grounds to your ground and to your outside grounds and so forth. So it's the ideal opportunity before things get cluttered, which was another problem here, and digging out stuff. I ended up with 20 bags of trash that got hauled to the curb, and you wouldn't believe it, but somebody stole it.
Well, Joe, I had somebody steal aluminum hardline off of a repeater site. Actually,
I'd believe that.
Took it off of the tower, and then, surprise, surprise, it was aluminum hardline. So, might have got $1 out of it.
Yeah, it's not copper.
Yeah.
There was a piece of Andrew Heliak's on the tower previously, and it was not being used. And the head of our tower crew for our club, and we have like 4 volunteers that do this now. He took it for use for a short run because it's only about 30 feet or so, and it will find use on one of our local repeaters.
Yeah. Again, feed lines, very important. Go with, the best feed line you can afford. It's just worth it. All right.
Like
let's one more call, 859-982-7373. Oh, sorry. 859-982-7373. We're running over here, so I want to get one last opportunity for the phone calls here. Okay, I want to ask you a little bit about the Hamcation stuff, but any last things about the renovations here that we missed?
Nope. I would say that it's something you can spend some time planning now because people are at home more, and get rid of old cables that aren't connected to anything, please, because all they do is they bring in more RF.
Yeah, and get a bag of those Snap-on chokes. They're definitely worth it. I have them on everything from USB cables to monitor cables to just everything. And I'm going to be putting more in when I build the new shack. So good thing to do. Well, I signed up for your one of your 2 forums at Hamcation. You've got 2 forums. You've got the kit forum, of course. And then you also are doing one on 3D printing, and that's the one I signed up for because I want to hear a little more about this because that's something that I have not got into, but you made me a wonderful little call sign display and sent it to me for my 50th birthday, and it's sitting in the shack. But I'm curious to hear what you have to say about that. So we should mention that if you go over to hamcation.com and sign up there, you can sign up to hear about that, as well as the kit build. So give us a minute or two on those.
Well, the kit building form will be the one that I normally give, but of course updated. But the 3D printer, of course, I used at the beginning of the pandemic to produce face shields for our local first responders. I made over 300 of them. And the 3D printer is very useful in ham radio because you can make things like insulators. I make cases for kits. That's a big thing. You can make little stands and stuff that hold up your little QRP radios and so forth. You can make a knobs for different radios, and a lot of that stuff is free online. You can just download the recipe, we like to call it, and what we call slice it, and I'll go over what the process is and how you can download a file and then adapt it to your printer and print it out. And I have some hints and kinks of things like what kind of print heads to use, because I ran this 24/7 for 3 months, and it's a entry-level Ender 3 Pro, and I learned a lot. I ended up servicing about every part in it, and because they're not meant to run 24/7 like that. And so there's a lot of things you learn about 3D printers, and they are very useful. Like I said, there's a zillion things you can make for ham radio. I bought it intending to make cases for kits, and it kind of grew from there. And so I'm able to not only do that, I'm helping design some kit cases now. And there's just a whole host of things that you can make, and they're not real fast, but what you get is what you design.
Yeah, some good stuff, and I look forward to hearing all about it. So make sure you sign up for that if that's of interest to you, and as well as the kit build and all kinds of stuff over at Hamcation SE coming up here in a month. So make sure to check that out, and that's free. And I bought a couple of tickets. I know you'll probably buy 2,000 tickets, but
No. not this time. I'll get a handful, but yeah, you know what? You gotta want a chance at that 705.
Yeah, it was too good to pass up, so I had to get a couple of tickets. So we'll see how that goes, but some good stuff from Joe coming up at Hamcation. So make sure you check that out. All right, well, Joe, I think we're about done here. We're running a little overtime, but thank you for coming on and talking about all this. And I'm sure next time it'll probably be kits again, but as always, we'll get you back on here and talk about it. And congratulations on getting on the front cover of CQ.
Well, thank you very much.
I don't think there's a song for that.
Surprise.
I don't think there's a song for that. There's a song for getting on the cover of the NCJ, but the Spurious Emissions did, on the cover of the NCJ. I don't think there's one for CQ, but yeah, that was nice to see. I like that.
Well, thank you very much for having me on, Neil. And I want to tell you a great big congratulations on the award. Very, very, very well deserved getting the Carol Perry Award.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a lot of fun to have all the comments this week, and I appreciate yours as well. And it's been great. So thank you once again to Hamcation for awarding that. And now you've got me. You told me stories of this banquet that they have down there at Hamcation. Now you've got me really wishing I was there, because it sounds great. So, but I gotta wait a year.
Yep, it's a long evening, but it's interesting.
Yeah, sounds like a lot of fun. So, really looking forward to that, and seeing everybody again. My goodness. So, I guess we'll keep fingers crossed for Huntsville, for Huntsville now. But just just hoping for the best. So, well, I think we've got all the comments and the tweets and everything wrapped up. So we'll go ahead and call it a wrap for this week's edition of Ham Talk Live. Thanks to my guest, Joe Eisneberg, K0NEB, and everybody out there in cyberspace for listening and typing in tonight. And invite you back next Thursday night, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Michael Coulter, WHCI, will be here to talk about the cancellation of Hamvention 2021 and the plans for the QSO party and other things during Hamvention weekend virtually. And for a list of all our upcoming guests, just go over to hamtalklive.com. And please, if you like the show, leave a review. That's how you can help back to the show, is to leave a review and help others find us faster. So for now, this is Neil Rapp, WB9VPG, saying 7375, and may the good DX be yours.